Welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're grateful you've chosen to join us today. Tell us, which part of the world are you watching from? Big city? Small town? Country? We'd love to know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Hidden Hand. Victor Nolan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of Harmon Industries' 45th floor conference room, watching the sunset paint Manhattan's skyline in amber and gold. To the board members and executives filing out behind him, he was just another mid-level operations consultant, competent but unremarkable. None of them knew that Victor had single-handedly saved their latest acquisition from disaster last month through his network of international contacts, or that 3 patents critical to their flagship product bore his name under a pseudonym. Victor preferred it that way. For 7 years, he had operated in the shadows of Harmon Industries, becoming the company's problem solver while Gerald Harmon took the credit. The arrangement suited Victor perfectly. It gave him time to build his own ventures quietly while drawing a comfortable salary. "Great work on the Jensen merger," said Leo Merritt, tapping Victor's shoulder. Leo was one of the few who recognized Victor's true value to the company. "Gerald seems pleased," Victor replied, watching the CEO's retreating back. "He should be. That presentation you prepared saved us millions in negotiation." Though I noticed Philip was quick to jump in and take credit. Leo's voice carried a note of disapproval. Philip Harmon, Gerald's son and heir apparent, had joined the company just 18 months ago, fresh from business school with an inflated ego and mediocre talent. Victor had mostly avoided direct interaction with him, finding the young man's arrogance exhausting. "Let him," Victor said with a shrug. "Results matter more than recognition." As they walked to the elevator, Leo lowered his voice. "Speaking of Philip, did you hear he's been spending a lot of time with Diana lately? Some charity thing they're both working on." Victor's expression remained neutral, though something cold settled in his chest. "My wife has many projects. I can't keep track of them all." In truth, Victor had noticed Diana's increased absences over the past 3 months. She'd been distant, constantly checking her phone, making excuses to leave the house. 15 years of marriage had taught Victor to read the signs, but he had chosen to wait, observe, and gather information before confronting her. That evening, Victor arrived home to their Upper West Side apartment earlier than usual. The lights were on, but the place was silent. "Diana," he called, setting down his briefcase. No answer. Victor moved through the apartment with practiced quiet. In the bedroom, Diana's laptop sat open on her vanity. She never left it unlocked, except today she had. A rookie mistake. Victor sat down and began to read the open email thread. "Meet me at the usual place. 7 p.m. Philip." Victor didn't feel rage or pain, only a cold, detached curiosity as he scrolled through months of messages between his wife and his boss's son. The affair had been going on for nearly 6 months. What surprised Victor wasn't the betrayal itself, but how careless they'd become. He heard the front door open. "Victor, you're home early." Diana's voice carried a false brightness that now rang hollow to his ears. Victor closed the laptop and turned to face his wife as she entered the bedroom. Diana Nolan was still strikingly beautiful at 38, tall and elegant with chestnut hair and sharp green eyes. They had met when Victor was beginning his career, long before he had accumulated his hidden wealth and influence. "Plan for tonight?" Victor asked casually. Diana's hand flew instinctively to her neck, a nervous habit she'd never managed to break. "Just dinner with Melissa. The charity auction is next week, and we have so much to finalize." Victor smiled, noting how the lie came so easily to her. "Give her my regards." An hour later, after Diana had left for her dinner with Melissa, Victor made a single phone call to Raymond Frost, a former military intelligence officer turned private investigator who owed Victor several favors. "I need surveillance and documentation," Victor said simply. "Tonight, and for the foreseeable future." Raymond didn't ask questions. He never did. Victor opened a hidden safe in his home office and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. Inside were detailed contingency plans for various scenarios he might face in life. He flipped to the section labeled Betrayal and began to review his options. By morning, He would have photographic evidence of his wife's infidelity. By the end of the week, he would understand the full extent of her deception. And then, only then, would he decide exactly how their worlds would burn. Chapter 2. The Dismissal. For 2 weeks, Victor maintained his routine while accumulating evidence. Diana and Philip had been careless, meeting at a boutique hotel in Tribeca, exchanging unencrypted messages, and even being spotted at restaurants far from their usual haunts. Raymond Frost had compiled a comprehensive dossier that would have made intelligence agencies proud. Victor learned that Diana had accessed their joint savings account repeatedly, withdrawing nearly $50,000 over 6 months. Philip had convinced her that with her social connections and his business acumen, they could start their own venture, once they were free of their respective encumbrances. Victor was just one of those encumbrances. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Victor received an email from Human Resources requesting his presence. He knew what was coming before he even entered the sterile conference room, where Philip Harmon sat with Tessa Monroe, the HR director who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Victor, please sit down," Philip said, his voice carrying the practiced gravity of someone playing a role they weren't suited for. At 32, Philip was handsome in a conventional way. Sandy hair, blue eyes, athletic build maintained by expensive personal trainers. Today he wore a tailored charcoal suit that Victor recognized as costing more than what most Harmon employees made in a month. "We've been conducting a comprehensive review of our operational structure," Philip began, not meeting Victor's eyes. "In the interest of streamlining our organization and optimizing efficiency, we've identified several positions that are redundant." Victor remained silent, watching Philip squirm slightly under his steady gaze. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately," Philip continued, gaining confidence from Victor's lack of reaction. "You'll receive 2 months severance, and Tessa will walk you through the exit process." "I see," Victor said, his voice betraying nothing. "Did your father approve this decision?" Philip's jaw tightened. "I don't need my father's approval for routine organizational adjustments. I'm the chief operations officer," a title Gerald had created specifically for his son, with responsibilities that remained ambiguous at best. "Was my performance unsatisfactory?" Victor asked, knowing full well his contributions had been essential to the company's recent successes. "It's not about performance," Philip said, a note of irritation creeping into his voice. "It's about structural optimization. We're moving in a different direction." Victor nodded slowly. "And what happens to the Jensen merger? The sole expansion?" Philip smiled, revealing perfect teeth that suggested extensive cosmetic work. "We have capable teams in place. No one is irreplaceable, Victor." The arrogance in Philip's tone confirmed what Victor already knew. This wasn't business. It was personal. Philip wanted him gone, and Diana had likely helped convince him it was necessary. Victor had seen the text messages suggesting as much. "You're right about that," Victor said, rising to his feet. "No one is irreplaceable." As Victor gathered his few personal items under Tessa's apologetic supervision, he made 3 calls from his personal phone. The first was to Vanessa Dyer, his contact at Morgan Stanley, who handled the financial backing for Harmon's expansion into Asian markets. The second was to Hiro Tanaka in Tokyo, who was leading the technology partnership that Gerald Harmon had been courting for over a year. The third was to Samuel Bishop, whose family's investment firm controlled a significant portion of Harmon Industries' financing. To each, Victor said only, "Hold all forward movement. I'll explain soon." As he was escorted from the building, Victor passed Leo in the hallway. His friend looked shocked. "What the hell happened?" Leo asked, falling into step beside him. "Philip decided I'm not essential," Victor replied calmly. "That's insane. Gerald can't have approved this." "Gerald isn't here. He's in Switzerland for the investor conference, remember?" Leo swore under his breath. "This is Philip's move while the old man is away. It has to be. What are you going to do?" Victor stopped at the elevator and turned to his friend. "I'm going to smile and say good luck. They're going to need it." Leo stared at him for a long moment. "There's something you're not telling me." "There's a lot I haven't told anyone," Victor admitted. "But you'll find out soon enough." As Victor walked out of Harmon Industries for the last time, he felt no anger, no resentment, only a sense of clarity. He had prepared for this contingency, just as he had prepared for many others. The rain had stopped, and the sun was breaking through the clouds as he hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The Waldorf Astoria," Victor replied. It was time to activate the contingency plan he'd been refining for years. By the time Gerald Harmon returned from Switzerland, his son's hasty decision would have set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. Chapter 3: The Revelation. Gerald Harmon's return from Switzerland coincided with the first tremors of disaster. The Korean technology partnership, a deal years in the making, had suddenly gone cold. Morgan Stanley had placed a hold on the financing for the Asian expansion, citing reassessment of market conditions. Most alarmingly, the Bishop family had requested an emergency meeting with the board to discuss their continued investment in Harmon Industries. Gerald Harmon was a man accustomed to control. At 68, he had built his company from a modest manufacturing operation into a global technology and logistics powerhouse. His silver hair and commanding presence had graced the covers of business magazines, and his reputation for shrewd decision-making was legendary. But today, as he stormed through the executive floor of Harmon Tower, he looked less like a titan of industry and more like a man watching his life's work crumble. "Where the hell is Philip?" he demanded of his assistant. "In the conference room with the executive team," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. When Gerald burst into the conference room, the heated discussion fell instantly silent. Philip sat at the head of the table, in Gerald's seat, looking significantly less confident than he had when firing Victor. "What the hell is happening?" Gerald demanded, his voice cutting through the tension. "I've got Samuel Bishop threatening to pull out, Tanaka won't return my calls, and our stock is down 8% since the market opened." Philip stood, adjusting his tie nervously. "Dad, we're handling it. There's been some market volatility, but—" "Don't give me that MBA bullshit," Gerald snapped. "Something specific has spooked our partners. What have you done while I was away?" The room fell silent again. Executive Vice President Margot Wells finally spoke up. "There have been some organizational changes implemented last week." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "What changes?" Philip cleared his throat. "Nothing major. Just some streamlining to improve operational efficiency. We let Victor and Nolan go," Leo said bluntly from his position near the window. Gerald froze. "You did what?" "It was a redundancy elimination," Philip said quickly. His position was critical to everything we're doing in Asia. Gerald exploded. "Victor is the only one Tanaka trusts. He's the one who brought the Bishop family in last year when we needed capital." The color drained from Philip's face. He was just an operations consultant. Gerald laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Is that what you thought?" He turned to address the entire room. "Victor Nolan has been the architect of our Asian strategy for years. He's the reason we have a foothold in Seoul at all. And you," he turned back to Philip, "fired him without consulting me." "I'm a COO," Philip said defensively. "It was an operational decision." "It was a catastrophic mistake," Gerald countered. "Get him back. Whatever it takes." Philip swallowed hard. "I've tried calling. He's not responding." Gerald's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Where is he?" "We don't know," Margot admitted. "He's not at his apartment. His wife says she hasn't seen him." Gerald pinched the bridge of his nose, visibly struggling to control his temper. "Leo, you're his friend. Find him." Leo nodded, but his expression suggested success was unlikely. "I'll try, but Victor can be elusive when he wants to be." As the meeting dissolved into crisis management, Leo slipped away and took the elevator to the lobby. Once outside, he walked 2 blocks before placing a call. "They're panicking," Leo said when the call connected. "Gerald just found out." "Right on schedule," Victor's voice replied calmly. "How's Philip holding up?" "Poorly." Gerald nearly took his head off in front of the entire executive team. "Diana's been calling the office looking for you." "Has she?" "Interesting. She hasn't tried my cell phone." Leo hesitated. "Victor, what exactly are you doing?" "Setting things right," Victor replied. "Come to the St. Regis tonight. Suite 1204. There's something I want to show you." That evening, As Leo entered the luxurious hotel suite, he found Victor calmly reviewing documents at a desk overlooking Central Park. The suite looked like a command center, with multiple laptops open and files meticulously arranged. "You've been busy," Leo observed. "I've been prepared," Victor corrected. "There's a difference." Leo accepted the whiskey Victor offered and settled into a chair. "Gerald wants you back. He's offering to double your salary, give you a seat on the board." Victor smiled thinly. "Too late. What exactly is your endgame here?" Victor gestured to a tablet displaying real-time stock information. Harman Industries had lost 12% of its value in a single day. "This is just the beginning. Because Philip fired you? That seems disproportionate." "It's not about the firing," Victor said, sliding a file folder across the desk. "It's about why." Leo opened the folder, and his eyes widened as he saw the photographs of Philip and Diana together in various compromising situations. "Jesus, Victor. I had no idea." "If you did, they thought they were being careful." Leo looked up from the photos. "Does Gerald know about this?" "Not yet, but he will, along with the rest of the board, when the time is right." "What's the right time?" Victor's expression hardened. "When I've dismantled everything Philip values. When Diana realizes exactly what she sacrificed. When Gerald understands the full scope of his son's incompetence." Leo studied his friend with new eyes. "I've known you for 7 years. I thought I knew what you were capable of." "Most people underestimate me," Victor said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "It's an advantage I've cultivated." "What do you need from me?" Victor hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "There's going to be an emergency board meeting tomorrow. Gerald will try to salvage the Korean deal. I need you to make sure this information reaches the right people." He handed Leo a sealed envelope. "What is it?" "The truth about Harman Industries' financial position. The real numbers, not the ones Philip has been presenting to the board." Leo's expression turned serious. "That could tank the company completely." "It could," Victor agreed, "unless someone steps in with a solution." "You?" Victor smiled, a predator's smile that never reached his eyes. "Not quite. You'll understand tomorrow." As Leo left the suite, he glanced back to see Victor standing by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, looking like a man who had calculated every move in a complex game. Meanwhile, across town, Diana Nolan sat in her darkened living room, staring at her phone. Victor had vanished without a trace. Their joint accounts had been frozen, and her calls to Philip had gone straight to voicemail since his disastrous meeting with Gerald. For the first time, Diana felt a cold flutter of fear as she realized she might have gravely underestimated her husband. Chapter 4. The Revelation. The emergency board meeting of Harman Industries began in chaos and descended from there. Samuel Bishop, patriarchal head of Bishop Investment Group, sat stone-faced as Gerald Harman attempted to reassure the board that the Korean technology partnership could be salvaged. "Hiro Tanaka has agreed to take my call tomorrow," Gerald said, his confidence clearly forced. "I believe we can get things back on track." "That's not what my sources tell me," Samuel replied, his weathered face impassive. "I'm hearing that Tanaka Industries has already entered preliminary discussions with Westridge Tech." A murmur rippled through the board members. Westridge was Harman's most aggressive competitor. "That's impossible," Philip interjected. "We have exclusivity agreements in place." Samuel Bishop fixed Philip with a cold stare. Those agreements were contingent on the personal involvement of specific individuals. Individuals who are no longer with the company, thanks to your streamlining. Before Philip could respond, the boardroom door opened and Leo Merritt entered, apologizing for his tardiness. As he took his seat, he discreetly slid folders to several key board members, including Samuel Bishop. "What is this?" Gerald demanded as Samuel opened his folder. The old investor's eyebrows rose as he scanned the contents. "It appears to be an accurate financial assessment of Harman Industries, significantly different from the reports we've been receiving." Philip blanched. "That's confidential internal information. Where did this come from?" All eyes turned to Leo, who simply shrugged. "I'm just the messenger." Samuel Bishop rose slowly to his feet. "Gerald, we've done business for 30 years. I've trusted your judgment, Even when I questioned your decision to install your son in a position he clearly wasn't ready for. He held up the financial report. But this level of misrepresentation crosses a line. I don't know what you're looking at, Gerald said, his voice tight. But I assure you, our financial reporting is fraudulent, Samuel finished flatly. Or, at the very least, creatively misleading. The bishops will be reconsidering our position in Harmon Industries. As if on cue, phones around the table began to buzz with notifications. The company's stock had dropped another 15% in the first hour of trading. This is absurd, Phillips sputtered. We can explain the discrepancies. It's simply a matter of accounting methodology. Samuel Bishop's laugh was devoid of humor. Son, I was analyzing balance sheets before you were born. This isn't methodology. This is deception. He turned to Gerald. You have until the end of the week to present a viable recovery plan, or we pull our financing. As the meeting dissolved into heated arguments, Leo slipped out and placed a call from the hallway. It's done, he said quietly. Bishop dropped your bomb exactly as you predicted. Perfect, Victor replied. Phase 1 complete. Are you ready for Phase 2? Just tell me what you need. Across town, Diana Nolan was growing desperate. Her credit cards had been declined at Bergdorf Goodman, a humiliation she hadn't experienced since college. The apartment's utilities had been mysteriously transferred out of their joint name, and her key card no longer worked at her fitness club. Where phone rang displaying Philip's number, she snatched it up. Finally, where have you been? Damage control. Philip's voice was tight with stress. Your husband has apparently decided to burn everything down on his way out. What do you mean? I mean he's systematically destroying Harmon Industries. The company's lost nearly 30% of its value in 2 days. My father is on the verge of a coronary, and the board is talking about emergency leadership changes. Diana felt her stomach tighten. But how could Victor do any of that? He was just a consultant. Philip's bitter laugh echoed through the phone. Apparently not. According to my father, Victor has been the hidden genius behind half our major initiatives for years. He has relationships with our investors, our partners, relationships I knew nothing about. That's impossible, Diana whispered, though a cold feeling was spreading through her chest. Victor never mentioned any of this. Well, he certainly didn't mention it to me before I fired him, Philip snapped. Did you know he speaks fluent Korean? That he personally negotiated the technology transfer agreements with Tanaka? That he's been his soul 12 times in the past 3 years? Diana sank onto the couch, her mind racing. The business trips Victor had taken, the late-night calls he claimed were to international offices, the casual way he'd mentioned meeting with overseas executives, she had never paid attention, too absorbed in her social life, and, recently, her affair with Philip. We need to find him, she said finally. Make him stop whatever he's doing. Don't you think I've tried? He's disappeared. My father's offering him anything he wants to come back, but he won't even take the calls. What about us? Diana asked, her voice small. What happens to our plans? Philip's silence told her everything she needed to know. Philip, I need to focus on saving the company right now, he said finally. My father is talking about removing me as COO. Everything's falling apart. So, you're abandoning me? Diana felt panic rising. After I risked everything, I'm not abandoning you, Philip said, but his tone lacked conviction. I just need time to fix this mess. We can't be seen together right now, anyway. It would only make things worse if people knew about us. After Philip hung up, Diana sat in stunned silence. The life she had so carefully planned, divorcing Victor, starting fresh with Philip, launching their new venture with the money she'd been siphoning from their accounts, was evaporating before her eyes. Her phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Plaza Hotel, Oak Room Bar, 8 p.m. Come alone if you want answers. V. Diana stared at the message, her heart pounding. After 7 days of silence, Victor was finally reaching out, but on his terms, not hers. At precisely 8 p.m., Diana entered the Oak Room Bar at the Plaza Hotel, scanning the dimly lit space for her husband. She spotted him at a corner table, looking remarkably composed in a tailored suit she didn't recognize. As she approached, she noticed the subtle changes in his appearance, his posture more commanding, his expression unreadable. Hello, Diana, Victor said, not rising as she took the seat across from him. You look tired. Where have you been? She demanded, struggling to keep her voice steady. Why haven't you answered my calls? I've been busy, he replied, taking a sip of his whiskey. Reorganizing, much like what Philip did at Harmon Industries. Victor, I don't know what you think is happening, but please, he interrupted, his voice soft but with an edge that made her flinch. Let's not insult each other with lies. I know about your affair with Philip. I know about the money you've been stealing from our accounts. I know about your plans to leave once you'd secured your position through Philip's new venture. Diana felt the blood drain from her face. Ow! Victor smiled thinly. I've always been more observant than you gave me credit for. Is that why you're destroying Harmon Industries? Some kind of twisted revenge? I'm not destroying anything, Victor said calmly. I'm simply withdrawing my support. There's a difference. What do you want from me? Diana asked, her voice barely audible. Victor leaned forward, his eyes cold. Nothing. Not anymore. I wanted to meet so you would understand exactly what's happening. You chose Philip because you thought he offered you a better future, wealth, status, excitement. But you backed the wrong horse, Diana. It wasn't like that, she protested weakly. It was exactly like that, Victor countered. And now you're going to watch as everything you thought you were gaining crumbles to dust. Philip will be removed as COO by the end of the week. His reputation in the industry will be unsalvageable, and you'll be left with nothing. No husband, no lover, no money, no future. Diana felt tears threatening. You can't do this. I already have. Victor stood, buttoning his jacket. Our marriage is over. My lawyer will contact you about the divorce. Don't bother looking for the money you stole. It's gone. Consider yourself lucky that I'm not pressing charges for financial fraud. Victor, please. Diana reached for his arm, but he stepped back, avoiding her touch. We could talk about this. 15 years of marriage deserves more than this. You should have thought of that before you decided to throw those years away, Victor replied, his voice devoid of emotion. Goodbye, Diana. As Victor walked away, Diana remained frozen in her seat, the full impact of her miscalculation washing over her. She had gambled everything on Philip Harmon, never suspecting that the quiet, unassuming husband she had grown to dismiss was actually holding all the cards. Chapter 5. The Count to Move. Gerald Harmon had aged a decade in a week. The company he had built over 40 years was in free fall, the stock price plummeting, partners backing out of deals, and the Bishop family publicly questioning the leadership's integrity. Worst of all, his son, the heir he had groomed to take over, had triggered the cascade of disasters with a single, stupid decision. Tell me again why you fired Victor Nolan, Gerald demanded, pacing his office while Philip sat miserably in a visitor's chair. I told you. It was a restructuring decision, Philip insisted, though his confidence had evaporated days ago. We needed to streamline operations. Bullshit, Gerald snapped. Leo Merritt says you've had it in for Victor for months. Said you felt threatened by him. Philip shifted uncomfortably. That's ridiculous. Why would I feel threatened by a mid-level consultant? Gerald stopped pacing and fixed his son with a hard stare. Because you knew he was more than that. Because despite my efforts to shield you, you realized Victor was the real brains behind our recent successes. Dad, that's not. Or was it something else? Gerald interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. Something more personal? Philip froze, his expression confirming Gerald's suspicions. Jesus Christ, Gerald sank into his chair. Tell me you didn't fire a critical employee because of a woman. Philip remained silent, his face flushed with shame. Gerald rubbed his temples, feeling the headache that had become his constant companion. Who is she? It doesn't matter, Philip muttered. It matters if it's costing me my company. Gerald shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. Who is she, Philip? The office door opened before Philip could respond, and Leo entered without knocking. Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see immediately. He placed a tablet on Gerald's desk, displaying a financial news website. The headline read, Korean tech giant Tanaka Industries announces partnership with Novice Capital. What the hell is Novice Capital? Gerald demanded. A new player, Leo replied. Incorporated in Delaware 3 years ago, privately held. They just announced they're acquiring the technology patents that Tanaka was going to license to us. 3 years. Gerald looked up sharply. Who's behind it? Leo's expression was grim. The CEO is listed as Raymond Frost. The primary shareholder is a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. But my sources tell me the real power behind Novice is Victor Nolan. Gerald stared at the tablet in disbelief. Victor has been planning this for 3 years. Not exactly, Leo explained. For what I understand, Novice was his contingency plan. Insurance, if you will. He's been building it quietly, patenting his own innovations instead of turning them all over to Harmon. Philip had gone pale. Are you saying he's been working against us this whole time? No. Leo's voice hardened as he looked at Philip. He was loyal to Harmon Industries until you gave him reason not to be. You fired him, remember? On the same day, he discovered his wife was sleeping with you. The office fell silent as Gerald slowly turned to his son, his expression a mixture of shock and disgust. Diana Nolan, you've been having an affair with Victor's wife. Philip couldn't meet his father's eyes. Dad, I can explain. Get out, Gerald whispered, his voice shaking with rage. Get out of my office. Get out of my building. Dad, you're suspended, effective immediately, Gerald said, standing. I'll deal with you later. Right now, I need to salvage what's left of this company. After Philip slunk from the office, Gerald turned to Leo. How bad is it? Worse than you think, Leo admitted. The Bishop family has formally announced they're divesting from Harmon. 3 board members have called for your resignation. And now Tanaka has partnered with Victor's company instead of ours. Gerald slumped in his chair. He's destroying everything. He's not destroying anything, Leo corrected. He's building something new from the opportunities you created by letting Philip drive him away. What does he want? Gerald asked, suddenly looking every day of his 68 years. Money? Power? Control of Harmon? I think he wants justice, Leo said simply. And I'm not sure there's anything you can offer that would change his course now. Across town, in the temporary headquarters of Novice Capital, Victor was reviewing the press coverage of the Tanaka partnership announcement with satisfaction. Beside him stood Vanessa Dyer, formerly of Morgan Stanley, now Novice's chief financial officer. Harmon stock dropped another 20% today, Vanessa reported. They're on the verge of a total collapse. And the Bishop family? Samuel is fully divested. He's expressed interest in investing in Novice instead. Victor nodded thoughtfully. Schedule a meeting. We could use his connections. Raymond Frost entered the conference room, looking incongruous in a business suit instead of his usual nondescript attire. As the public face of Novice, he had been thrust into the spotlight, a role the former intelligence officer found uncomfortable but was managing admirably. The Seoul office called, Raymond reported. Hiro Tanaka wants to accelerate the timeline on the joint venture. He's impressed with how quickly we've moved. Tell him we'll accommodate, Victor replied. And what about our other matter? Raymond's expression turned grim. Philip Harmon has been suspended from Harmon Industries. He's holed up in his penthouse, not taking calls. Diana has been trying to reach him without success. And the documentation I asked for? All here. Raymond placed a thick folder on the table. Bank records, text messages, emails, everything proving their conspiracy to defraud you and embezzle company resources. Victor examined the evidence with clinical detachment. Perfect. Have copies sent to Gerald Harmon and the board. Vanessa looked concerned. Are you sure? This could be the final nail in Harmon Industries' coffin. Gerald deserves to know exactly who his son is, Victor said firmly. What he does with that information is his choice. As his team dispersed to execute his instructions, Victor moved to the window overlooking the city. In just 10 days, he had transformed from an overlooked consultant to the architect of a new corporate power. Novice Capital was emerging from the shadows, built on the relationships and innovations he had cultivated for years while working in Gerald Harmon's shadow. His phone rang, a number he recognized immediately. Hello, Gerald, he answered calmly. I've been expecting your call. What will it take? Gerald's voice was weary, defeated. Name your price. You assume this is about money, Victor replied. isn't everything in the end? Not for me. Victor's voice hardened. This is about respect, recognition, justice. I always respected you, Gerald protested. You were vital to Harmon. Yet you allowed your son to fire me without consultation. You let him take credit for my work for years. Gerald sighed heavily. I was wrong. I admit that. But don't punish the entire company, hundreds of innocent employees, for my mistakes. I'm not punishing anyone, Victor said coolly. I'm competing. That's business, Gerald. You taught me that. What if I offered you control? A merger between Harmon and Novice, with you as CEO? Victor laughed softly. Too late. I already have everything I need. Then why take this call at all? Gerald asked, frustration evident in his voice. Victor paused, considering the question. Because despite everything, I respected you once. You built something impressive, Gerald. It's a shame your blind spot for Philip destroyed it. He's my son, Gerald said simply. Yes, Victor agreed. That was always his only qualification. After ending the call, Victor returned to the conference table where a stack of documents awaited his signature. The future of Novice Capital was unfolding exactly as he had planned, rising from the ashes of his former life. Meanwhile, Diana Nolan sat alone in an empty apartment, staring at an eviction notice. Her calls to Philip remained unanswered, her credit cards were maxed out, and the reality of her new circumstances was finally sinking in. She had gambled everything on Philip Harmon and lost spectacularly. Her phone rang, a familiar number that she had been calling without success for days. Philip, she answered desperately. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you. It's over, Diana. Philip's voice was cold, distant. My father knows everything. I've been suspended. The company is imploding. What are we going to do? She asked, panic rising in her voice. We? Philip laughed bitterly. There is no we anymore. I'm trying to salvage what's left of my career. But we had plans, Diana protested. The new venture, the future we talked about. Wake up, Diana, Philip snapped. Those plans depended on my position at Harmon, which is gone now, thanks to your husband. He was never supposed to find out, Diana whispered. Well, he did, and he's systematically destroyed everything. My career, my reputation, my future. I have to focus on damage control. What about me? Diana's voice broke. I have nothing left. Philip's silence spoke volumes. Finally, he said, I'm sorry, Diana. I can't help you anymore. The line went dead, leaving Diana staring at her phone in disbelief. In less than 2 weeks, her carefully constructed life had completely unraveled, leaving her alone with the consequences of her betrayal. Chapter 6. The Consolidation. 1 month after Victor Nolan's dismissal from Harmon Industries, the business world was still reeling from the meteoric rise of Novice Capital. What had appeared to be an overnight success was revealed to be the result of years of careful planning and strategic positioning. Financial analysts were discovering that Victor had been quietly filing patents, cultivating relationships, and building a shadow organization while still employed at Harmon. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature titled The Invisible Architect, detailing how Victor had operated as the hidden genius behind Harmon's most successful initiatives while simultaneously laying the groundwork for his own empire. Business schools were already developing case studies on what some were calling the most elegant corporate revenge in modern history. In the gleaming new offices of Novice Capital, Victor reviewed the final acquisition papers with his legal team. Harmon Industries, or what remained of it, was being sold to a consortium led by Novice. The once mighty corporation had been reduced to a shell of its former self, its stock price decimated, its major partners defected, its leadership in disarray. The board has approved the terms, Victor's general counsel confirmed. Gerald Harmon has agreed to step down as CEO, effective immediately. And Philip, Victor asked, resigned 3 weeks ago. According to our sources, he's left the country, possibly Singapore or Malaysia. Victor nodded, unsurprised. Philip had always been a coward at heart, running from consequences rather than facing them. What about the employees? Victor asked. As instructed, all rank-and-file employees will be offered positions with novice or generous severance packages. The executive team, however, We'll need to reapply if they want to stay, Victor finished. With the exception of Leo Merritt, who becomes our new chief strategy officer. Leo, who had been reviewing documents nearby, looked up with a smile, already accepting the position before offering it. Was there any doubt? Victor replied. As the legal team departed, Leo poured 2 glasses of scotch and handed one to Victor. To success, he said, raising his glass. Victor clinked glasses but didn't drink immediately. It doesn't feel like success yet. You've accomplished everything you set out to do, Leo pointed out. Harmon is yours. Philip is disgraced and on the run. Gerald has been humbled. What more could you want? Closure, Victor said simply. Leo studied his friend carefully. And Diana? Have you heard from her? My lawyer has. She's contesting the divorce terms. After everything she did, Victor's expression hardened. She never understood who I really was. Even now, she thinks she can manipulate the situation. Will she get anything? The law entitles her to certain considerations, Victor acknowledged, but nothing close to what she expected. Leo hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind for weeks. Was any of it real? Your marriage? Victor stared into his glass, momentarily lost in thought. I loved her once, or thought I did. Perhaps I was just in love with the idea of a normal life. The successful executive, the beautiful wife, the perfect home. And now I see it for what it was, a cover story, a distraction from what I was really building. Leo nodded thoughtfully. And Gerald? Will you meet with him before the acquisition is finalized? Yes, Victor said, his expression unreadable. He's requested a private meeting tomorrow. One last conversation before the torch passes officially. The following day, Victor arrived at Gerald Harmon's penthouse overlooking Central Park. The once imposing business titan looked diminished somehow, sitting in his leather chair with a tumbler of bourbon at 10 in the morning. Victor, Gerald nodded in greeting. Thank you for coming. You said it was important, Victor replied, remaining standing. Gerald gestured to a chair. Please, this won't take long. Victor sat, his posture relaxed but alert. I wanted to see you face to face, Gerald began, before the acquisition is complete. To understand something. What's that? Was this always your plan? To take everything from me? Victor considered the question carefully. No, my plan was to work for you, learn from you, and eventually build something of my own. Taking Harmon was never the objective. Then why? Because your son made it personal, Victor said simply. He crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Gerald nodded slowly. Philip has always been impulsive, entitled. I spoiled him after his mother died. Tried to give him everything, including a company he couldn't run. Gerald didn't deny it. I wanted to believe he could grow into the role. That belief cost you everything. Not everything, Gerald corrected. I still have my name, my reputation damaged as it is. And I still have the knowledge that I built something significant, even if I couldn't sustain it. Victor inclined his head, acknowledging the point. What will you do with Harmon? Gerald asked. Dismantle it completely? No, Victor replied. The acquisition isn't about destruction. It's about integration. Harmon built the foundation. Novice will build the future. Gerald studied him for a long moment. You know, in many ways, you're the son I wish I'd had. Victor's expression remained impassive. We both know that's not true. You always chose Philip, regardless of his failings. Because he was my blood, Gerald admitted. My legacy. Some legacies aren't worth preserving. Gerald flinched at the harshness of the statement, but didn't argue. What will happen to him now? That depends on Philip, Victor said coolly. If he stays gone, nothing. If he returns and keeps his distance, nothing. If he attempts to interfere with my business or my life in any way. He left the threat unspoken. Gerald nodded, understanding the terms. And Diana? She made her choice. Victor's voice hardened. She chose poorly. Marriages end every day, Gerald observed. Was all this really necessary because my son had an affair with your wife? This wasn't about the affair, Victor clarified. It was about respect, about consequences. Your son thought he could take what was mine, my position, my wife, my dignity, without consequences. He needed to learn that actions have costs. An expensive lesson, Gerald murmured. The most valuable ones usually are. Gerald finished his bourbon and set the glass down with finality. I hope it was worth it, Victor. I hope when the dust settles and you're sitting in my chair, running what used to be my company, you find it satisfying. Victor stood, buttoning his jacket. It's not about satisfaction, Gerald. It's about justice, fairness, balance. The scales needed to be evened. And are they now? Gerald asked, looking suddenly old and tired. Victor considered the question. Almost. As he left Gerald Harmon's penthouse for the last time, Victor felt neither triumph nor regret. The acquisition of Harmon Industries was simply the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. The real work, building Novice Capital into the company he had always envisioned, was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. 6 months after the acquisition of Harmon Industries, Novice Capital had emerged as one of the most dynamic companies in the technology sector. Under Victor's leadership, the integrated organization had secured the Korean partnerships, expanded into emerging markets, and launched innovations that had competitors scrambling to catch up. The business press had dubbed Victor the Shadow CEO, highlighting how he had operated behind the scenes for years before emerging into the spotlight. A profile on Forbes called him the most brilliant executive no one knew about until it was too late. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Victor was reviewing quarterly projections with his executive team when his assistant interrupted with an urgent message. "Sir, Philip Harmon is in the lobby. He's demanding to see you." The room fell silent. Everyone present knew the history between Victor and Gerald Harmon's disgraced son. "How interesting," Victor said, his voice betraying no emotion. "Is he alone?" "Yes, sir. Security has detained him, but he's causing quite a scene." Victor considered for a moment. "Have security bring him to conference room 3. I'll meet him there." After dismissing the meeting, Victor walked unhurriedly to the conference room, where he found Philip pacing nervously. 6 months of exile had not been kind to the younger Harmon. His tailored suits had been replaced by casual, where that hung loosely on his frame, and his once confident demeanor had given way to a twitchy anxiety. "Philip," Victor greeted him coolly. "This is unexpected." Philip stopped pacing, his expression a mixture of desperation and resentment. "I need to talk to you." "About?" "You know damn well what about," Philip snapped. "You've destroyed everything. My career, my reputation, my future, all gone because of you." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Because of me? Interesting perspective." "You set me up," Philip accused. "You manipulated everything from the beginning." "Did I force you to have an affair with my wife?" Victor asked calmly. "Did I compel you to fire me without cause? Did I make you lie to your father and the board about the company's finances?" Philip's face flushed with anger. "You were building a competing company while working for my father. You're the one who betrayed us." "I was creating a contingency plan," Victor corrected. "Insurance against precisely the kind of betrayal you eventually carried out." "You think you're so clever," Philip snarled. "You've stolen my father's company, turned everyone against me, even Diana." "Ah yes, Diana," Victor interrupted, his voice hardening. "How is my ex-wife? Still calling you, begging for help? Or has she finally accepted that you abandoned her when things got difficult?" Philip looked away, confirming Victor's suspicions. "You didn't just betray me, Philip," Victor continued. "You betrayed her too. You made promises you never intended to keep. You used her, just as you tried to use me." "I loved her," Philip protested weakly. "No," Victor shook his head. "You loved the idea of taking something that belonged to someone else. You never cared about Diana as a person." Philip slumped into a chair, the fight draining out of him. "What do you want from me? I've lost everything. Isn't that enough?" "I don't want anything from you," Victor replied honestly. "You're here because you want something from me." Philip looked up, his expression confirming Victor's assessment. "Money," Victor guessed. "You've burned through whatever you had saved. Your father has cut you off. Now you're desperate." "I need a fresh start," Philip admitted. "Somewhere far from here, where people don't know about." He trailed off. "Your spectacular failure," Victor finished for him. "Your betrayal of your father, your company, and everyone who trusted you." Philip flinched but didn't deny it. Victor studied the broken man before him, feeling neither satisfaction nor pity. Why should I help you? Because you've won, Philip said, his voice barely audible. You've taken everything. What's a little money to you now? Victor laughed softly. That's your pitch. You've beaten me, so be generous? You haven't learned anything, have you? Philip's expression hardened. Fine. Then how about this? Help me, or I'll go public with everything I know about how you operated at Harmon. How you were secretly building Navas while taking a salary from my father. Blackmail now. Victor's voice was dangerously quiet. You really are desperate. I've got nothing left to lose, Philip said, a note of defiance returning to his voice. Victor reached into his jacket and removed a small recorder, placing it on the table between them. That's where you're wrong. You have your freedom to lose. Philip stared at the device. What is that? Evidence, Victor replied simply, of conspiracy, corporate espionage, fraud, and embezzlement. Your conversations with Diana planning to steal company resources. Your attempts to access protected intellectual property. I've had it all documented for months. The color drained from Philip's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Raymond Frost is very thorough. Former intelligence officer, you know. He has a talent for surveillance. Philip swallowed hard. What are you going to do? That depends on you, Victor said, leaning forward. Walk away now. Leave New York. Never contact me, Diana, or anyone associated with Navas Capital again. Do that, and these recordings remain private. And if I don't, then the FBI receives evidence of multiple federal crimes committed by Philip Harmon. I imagine they'd be very interested, given the scale of financial losses involved. Philip stared at Victor, finally seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time, not as the unassuming consultant he'd dismissed, but as the calculating strategist who had orchestrated his downfall with precision. You've been planning this all along, Philip whispered. No, Victor corrected. I prepared for it. There's a difference. Philip stood on shaky legs. This isn't over. It is, Victor stated firmly. Unless you want to spend the next decade in federal prison. Make your choice. After Philip had been escorted from the building, Leo found Victor standing by the window of his office, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Philip Harmon paid you a visit, Leo observed. Anything I should be concerned about? No, Victor replied. He won't be a problem anymore. Leo studied his friend carefully. Did that give you what you needed? The confrontation? Victor turned from the window. Partially. There's still one conversation left to have. Diana. Victor nodded. She's been trying to delay the divorce proceedings, using every legal maneuver her new attorney can think of. Why bother? Leo asked. The prenuptial agreement is solid. It's not about money anymore, Victor explained. It's about control. She can't accept that she miscalculated so completely. Will you meet with her? Victor checked his watch. In an hour. One final conversation to close this chapter permanently. Diana Nolan had once been the elegant wife of a successful executive. Now, as she sat in the upscale restaurant waiting for Victor, she looked like a woman struggling to maintain the appearance of her former life. Her designer clothes were from last season, her jewelry less impressive than before. Her smile strained when Victor finally appeared at the table. Thank you for meeting me, she said as he sat down across from her. Victor said nothing, simply studying her with the detached interest of a scientist observing a specimen. Diana shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. I've been trying to reach you. Through your lawyers, Victor noted, attempting to contest the prenuptial agreement you willingly signed. Victor, this has gone too far, Diana said, leaning forward. We were married for 15 years. Doesn't that count for something? It counted for everything, Victor replied evenly, until you decided it didn't. People make mistakes. Diana's voice softened, taking on the persuasive tone she had used successfully throughout their marriage. I made a terrible mistake with Philip. I see that now. You see it now because he abandoned you when things became difficult, Victor observed. Not because you regret betraying me. Diana flinched at the accuracy of his assessment. Can't we at least discuss a more equitable settlement? The prenup was signed under different circumstances. Yes, Victor agreed. When you thought I was just a mid-level executive with modest savings and a good salary. When you had no idea what I was actually building. That's not fair, Diana protested. You never told me about Novice, about the patents, about any of it. And would it have mattered? Victor asked, genuinely curious. If you had known I was worth millions, would you have stayed faithful? Diana's hesitation was answer enough. That's what I thought, Victor said quietly. You didn't betray me because you fell in love with Philip. You betrayed me because you thought he offered a better return on investment. That's a terrible thing to say, Diana whispered, tears forming in her eyes. But accurate, Victor countered. You viewed our marriage as a transaction. When you thought Philip offered better terms, you switched allegiances without hesitation. Diana wiped away a tear. What do you want from me, Victor? Nothing, he said simply. I arranged this meeting because I wanted you to understand something. The divorce will proceed according to the terms of the prenuptial agreement. No negotiations, no extensions, no further delays. And if I fight it, Victor's expression hardened. Then I'll release evidence of your conspiracy with Philip to defraud me and embezzle funds. The criminal charges would be significant. Diana stared at him, seeing a side of her husband she had never recognized during their marriage. Who are you? She asked finally. I don't even know you anymore. You never did, Victor replied, rising from the table. That was the problem. As he walked away, leaving Diana alone with the remains of a life she had discarded too easily, Victor felt the last piece of his old identity falling away. The man who had played the role of unassuming husband and overlooked executive no longer existed. In his place stood the architect of a new empire, built from the ruins of betrayal and miscalculation. Chapter 8, The Legacy. 1 year after the acquisition of Harman Industries, Novice Capital celebrated its official public launch with a gala event at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The business elite of New York gathered to witness what the Wall Street Journal had called the most anticipated corporate debut of the decade. Victor Nolan, now firmly established as one of the most powerful executives in the technology sector, moved through the crowd with easy confidence. The company he had quietly built while working in Gerald Harman's shadow was now valued at over $20 billion, with partnerships spanning 5 continents and innovations that were redefining multiple industries. Quite a turnout, Leo observed, joining Victor near a display of ancient Greek artifacts. Half of Wall Street is here, plus tech royalty from both coasts. And you're surprised? Victor asked with a slight smile. Not surprised, Leo corrected. Impressed. A year ago, most of these people had never heard of Novice Capital. Now, they're falling over themselves to be associated with it. Victor sipped his champagne, surveying the room with calculated detachment. People are drawn to success. They want to be near it, hoping some of it might rub off on them. Speaking of which, Leo nodded toward the entrance. Look who just arrived. Gerald Harman stood in the doorway, looking distinguished but diminished somehow. At Victor's invitation, the former CEO had joined Novice's advisory board 6 months earlier, a position with prestige but no actual power. Should I rescue him from the vultures? Leo asked as reporters began to converge on Gerald. Give him a moment, Victor replied. Gerald has always enjoyed the spotlight. As they watched, Gerald fielded questions with practiced ease, praising Victor's leadership and Novice's innovations without a hint of the bitterness that might have been expected. He's adapted well, Leo noted, considering everything. Gerald is a survivor, Victor said with grudging respect. Always has been. Later in the evening, as the event reached its peak, Victor found himself momentarily alone on the museum's balcony, enjoying a rare moment of solitude. The sound of footsteps alerted him to someone's approach. Quite a triumph, Gerald Harman said, joining him at the railing. You should be proud. Victor inclined his head in acknowledgement. I am. You know, I've been thinking about our last private conversation, Gerald continued. When I asked if it was worth it, I remember. You didn't really answer then, Gerald observed. I wonder if you could now, with a year's perspective. Victor considered the question carefully. Yes, he said finally. It was worth it. Because you won? Gerald pressed. Because you took everything? No, Victor shook his head. Because justice was served. Balance was restored. Gerald laughed softly. You're a philosopher as well as a businessman. The two aren't mutually exclusive. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out over the city lights. Have you heard from Philip? Victor asked eventually. Gerald's expression tightened. He's in Singapore. Started some small consulting firm. He calls occasionally, usually when he needs money. And do you provide it? He's still my son, Gerald said simply. Despite everything. Victor nodded, understanding the obligation even if he didn't share it. And Diana? Gerald asked. The divorce was finalized, I understand. Yes, Victor confirmed. She received exactly what the prenuptial agreement specified. No more, no less. Was she surprised by that outcome? She was surprised by many things, Victor said, his voice devoid of emotion. Mostly by the discovery that I wasn't who she thought I was. Gerald studied him thoughtfully. In all our years working together, I never really knew you either. I saw what you allowed me to see. The competent, unassuming executive who solved problems and never sought the spotlight. That was by design, Victor admitted. And now, Gerald gestured toward the gala inside. You seem comfortable with attention. It serves a purpose, Victor explained. The company needs a visible leader, a persona for the public and the markets to connect with. Just another role you're playing, Gerald observed. I wonder if anyone truly knows the real Victor Nolan. Victor smiled enigmatically. Perhaps not. Does anyone truly know anyone else? Before Gerald could respond, they were interrupted by Vanessa Dyer, now Novice's CFO. Sorry to intrude, she said, but the Japanese delegation has arrived, and they're asking for you specifically, Victor. Duty calls, Victor said to Gerald, straightening his jacket. If you'll excuse me, Gerald nodded, watching as Victor transformed seamlessly from philosophical conversationalist to commanding CEO, greeting the Japanese executives with perfect etiquette and flawless language skills. As the gala continued into the night, celebrating Novice Capital's meteoric rise, Victor moved through the crowd with deliberate purpose. Every interaction carefully calculated to strengthen his company's position. The man who had once operated in the shadows now commanded the spotlight, not because he craved attention, but because it served his greater vision. Later that night, long after the last guest had departed, Victor returned to his penthouse overlooking Central Park. The space was minimalist and modern, reflecting his preference for clarity and purpose over ostentation. Unlike the home he had shared with Diana, this space contained nothing superfluous, nothing that wasn't functional or meaningful. As he poured himself a glass of whiskey, Victor reflected on Gerald's question about worth and cost. The past 18 months had transformed his life completely, from underestimated executive to industry titan, from betrayed husband to solitary architect of a new empire. Had been worth it? The question lingered as Victor moved to the window, looking out at the city he had conquered. The answer wasn't in the wealth he had accumulated or the power he now wielded. It was in the fundamental balance that had been restored. Those who had betrayed him had faced consequences proportionate to their actions. Those who had remained loyal had been rewarded accordingly. Justice, not revenge, had been his primary motivation, though the line between the two could admittedly blur at times. Victor had always understood that distinction, even if others couldn't see it. His phone chimed with a message from Leo. Tokyo deal confirmed. We got everything we wanted. Victor smiled slightly. The future was unfolding according to plan. Novice Capital was positioned to redefine multiple industries, with innovations that would cement Victor's legacy far beyond the personal drama that had catalyzed his emergence from the shadows. The architect had completed his masterwork, not of ruin as his enemies had feared, but of creation, a new empire built from the ashes of betrayal and miscalculation. Chapter 9. The Resolution. 5 years after the fall of Harman Industries and the rise of Novice Capital, Victor Nolan had become a legend in business circles. The shadowy genius who had engineered one of the most remarkable corporate ascensions in modern history. Novice had expanded globally, with offices in 12 countries and innovations that had disrupted multiple industries. On a crisp autumn morning, Victor sat in his private office reviewing the final details of Novice's latest acquisition when his assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "Sir, Diana Nolan is here. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." Victor paused, momentarily surprised. He hadn't seen or spoken to his ex-wife since their final meeting 5 years earlier. "Send her in." Diana entered the office with a fraction of her former confidence. She was still attractive at 43, but the years had not been as kind to her as they might have been. Her designer clothes were tasteful but not current. Her jewelry modest compared to what she had once worn. "Victor," she said, her voice softer than he remembered. "Thank you for seeing me." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "What brings you here after all this time?" Diana sat, placing her handbag carefully in her lap. "I'm moving to Chicago next month. I wanted to clear the air before I left New York." "There's nothing to clear," Victor replied evenly. "Our business was concluded years ago." "Not our legal business," Diana clarified. "Our personal business. The things left unsaid." Victor leaned back, studying her with detached curiosity. "Such as?" Diana took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. Not because I want anything from you," she added quickly, seeing his skeptical expression, "but because I need to say it for my own peace of mind." "An interesting development," Victor observed. "What prompted this sudden need for closure?" "It wasn't sudden," Diana admitted. "It's been building for years. Watching you succeed, while Philip and I—" She trailed off. "While you face the consequences of your choices," Victor finished for her. Diana nodded, accepting the harsh truth. "Yes, exactly that." "And Philip?" Victor asked. "How is he faring these days?" "I wouldn't know," Diana said with a touch of bitterness. "He cut off all contact once it became clear I couldn't help him anymore. Last I heard, he was in Hong Kong, trying to rebuild some semblance of a career." Victor wasn't surprised. Philip had always been fundamentally weak, abandoning ship at the first sign of trouble. "And you?" he asked, more out of politeness than genuine interest. "Chicago represents a fresh start." "Something like that," Diana agreed. "I've been offered a position with an art gallery there. Not glamorous, but honest work." Victor nodded, acknowledging the implied contrast with her past choices. "There's something I've wanted to ask you for years," Diana said after a brief silence. "Something I could never understand." "What's that?" "Why didn't you expose me publicly?" she asked. "You had evidence of what Philip and I had planned, the money we'd diverted. You could have ruined me completely, pressed charges even. But you didn't." Victor considered the question carefully. "Would that have served any purpose beyond petty satisfaction?" "Most people in your position would have wanted that satisfaction," Diana pointed out. "I'm not most people," Victor replied simply. "Public humiliation and legal prosecution weren't necessary. You lost what you valued most: status, wealth, security. That was consequence enough." Diana looked down at her hands. "You always were more calculating than vengeful." "I never appreciated that distinction until it was too late." "Few did," Victor acknowledged. "It was an advantage." They sat in silence for a moment, the years between them filled with unspoken truths. "I have one last question," Diana said finally. "Were you ever going to tell me? About Novice, about what you were really building all those years?" Victor's expression remained neutral. "No. Why not?" The hurt in her voice seemed genuine. 15 years of marriage, and you never trusted me with the truth." "Trust is earned," Victor said simply. "Your actions proved my instincts correct." Diana flinched, but didn't argue the point. "I suppose I deserve that." "It wasn't about deserving," Victor clarified. "It was about recognizing reality. You married the man you thought I was, the reliable, moderately successful executive who would provide you with the lifestyle you wanted. You never showed interest in who I actually was." The brutal accuracy of his assessment left Diana momentarily speechless. "I should go," she said finally, rising from her chair. "Thank you for seeing me. I know you didn't have to." Victor stood as well. "I wish you well in Chicago, Diana. I hope you find what you're looking for." She paused at the door, turning back with a sad smile. "You know what's ironic? I could have had everything if I'd just been patient. If I just appreciated what was right in front of me all along." "Perhaps," Victor acknowledged. "But we'll never know." After Diana left, Victor returned to his work, the brief interruption from his past barely disrupting his focus. 5 years had dulled whatever emotional connection might have remained, leaving only clinical observations and philosophical reflections. Later that evening, Victor attended a charity gala where he was receiving an award for novices' humanitarian initiatives. As he delivered his acceptance speech, he noticed Gerald Harmon in the audience, now fully retired but still a respected figure in certain circles. After the formalities, Gerald approached him at the bar. "Impressive speech. You've become quite the public figure." "When necessary," Victor replied, accepting a glass of scotch from the bartender. "I saw Diana today," Gerald mentioned casually. "She said she came to see you." Victor raised an eyebrow. "You're still in touch with my ex-wife?" "Occasionally," Gerald admitted. "She checks on Philip through me sometimes." "Old habits. And how is your son?" Victor asked, his tone neutral. Gerald sighed, struggling. Some lessons take longer to learn than others. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two men who had once been adversaries, but had reached a kind of understanding over the years. "You know what I could never figure out?" Gerald said eventually. "Whether you planned all of this from the beginning, or if you were just exceptionally prepared when opportunity presented itself." Victor smiled slightly. "Does it matter?" "I suppose not," Gerald conceded. "The result is the same either way." As the evening progressed, Victor moved through the crowd with practiced ease, fulfilling his obligations as Novice's founder and CEO. To the outside world, he appeared the consummate business leader, confident, articulate, visionary. Only those who had known him longest, like Leo, recognized the calculated nature of each interaction, the careful separation between Victor's public persona and his true self. "Another successful conquest," Leo observed as they left the gala. "The Morrison Foundation will be announcing their partnership with Novice next week." "As expected," Victor replied. "Their board was impressed with our sustainable technology initiatives." Leo studied his friend as they waited for their cars. "Diana's visit didn't unsettle you at all, did it?" "Should have. Most people would feel something: anger, satisfaction, nostalgia. Something." Victor considered this. "I felt confirmation that the assessments I made and the actions I took were correct. And closure." Leo pressed. "Did you get that?" "I never needed it," Victor said simply. This chapter was closed years ago. Later that night, in the solitude of his penthouse, Victor reviewed the final acquisition papers for a European technology firm that would complete Novice's global expansion strategy. The moves he had set in motion years earlier were continuing to unfold with precision, each piece falling into place according to his design. A text message from Raymond Frost interrupted his work. PH attempting to secure funding in Hong Kong for new venture, using your name as leverage with potential investors. Victor's expression hardened momentarily. Even after 5 years, Philip Harmon hadn't learned his lesson. Some people never did. "Handle it," Victor texted back. Quietly, he returned to his work without further thought. Philip's desperate attempts at relevance were beneath his concern now, a minor irritation to be dealt with efficiently and then forgotten. The man who had once fired him with casual arrogance, laughing about streamlining and non-essential personnel, was now reduced to trading on Victor's name to secure meetings with second-tier investors. Justice had a certain elegance when properly executed. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Victor stood at his window, watching the city come to life. The empire he had built from the ruins of betrayal now stretched across continents, employing thousands and transforming industries. What had begun as a contingency plan, protection against the very betrayal that had eventually come, had evolved into something far greater than mere revenge. In the end, Victor reflected, that was the fundamental difference between him and those who had underestimated him. Philip, Diana, even Gerald in his way. They had all been reactive, responding to immediate desires and threats without seeing the larger pattern. Victor had always looked further ahead, planning not just for the next move, but for dozens of potential scenarios. The phone on his desk chimed with a reminder. The quarterly board meeting would begin in an hour. Victor turned from the window, leaving behind reflections on the past. The architect had completed his work of ruin and rebirth. What remained now was to build the future, one calculated move at a time. In the boardroom, surrounded by the leadership team he had carefully selected, Victor presented the company's 5-year strategic plan, a vision so ambitious it would have seemed impossible from anyone else. But Victor Nolan had long since proven that the impossible was merely a challenge to be methodically dismantled and reconstructed according to his design. "Questions?" he asked after concluding the presentation. The room remained silent, the board members still processing the scope of his vision. "Then let's begin," Victor said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had faced betrayal, calculated his response, and emerged victorious. Not through luck or circumstance, but through meticulous planning and ruthless execution. The architect of ruin had become the architect of empire, leaving behind the ashes of those who had dared to betray him, never looking back.